Emma never expected the night to turn into something unforgettable. Not in the way it did. Not in the way it touched something deep in her chest. She had lived in the quiet Colorado home for 3 years, trying to blend into a family that already had its own rhythms, habits, and emotional history. She married David out of love, but loving him didn't automatically make her a natural part of everything that came with him, especially his son, Michael. He was 20, tall, quiet, polite enough when needed, but distant in a way she could never fully understand. Not cold but unreachable. Like he lived behind a glass wall where nobody could follow. That evening began like any other. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, nothing that felt like a sign. The sky outside was a deep blue fading toward night. The house was silent except for the hum of the heater, and Emma was finishing the last of the dishes. David was away on a business trip, which always made the house feel too still. She wasn't scared to be alone. She simply didn't like the way silence made her thoughts louder. Even the clink of a plate landing in the drying rack sounded sharper. She wiped her hands on a towel and paused, trying to decide whether to watch a movie or just go upstairs and sleep early. But then she heard it. Not a loud sound. Not something clear or alarming. Just a soft, broken noise she couldn't identify. It didn't even sound like a cry at first. More like someone trying not to make a sound, someone fighting their own breath. She frowned, turning her ear toward the hallway. The noise came again, shaky, uneven. Her heartbeat stumbled. It was coming from upstairs. Her first thought naturally was Michael. But she froze for a second. Should she check on him? Did he even want her near? He rarely spoke more than necessary. He always kept his emotions wrapped tight like they belonged somewhere private. If she knocked on his door, would she upset him? Annoy him? Make him feel watched? But the sound came again, slightly louder now, full of something fragile, and instinct overruled hesitation. She climbed the stairs quickly but silently, every step sharpening her worry. When she reached the hallway, she could see the faint glow of light under Michael's door. It wasn't fully closed. A small gap revealed the warm light inside the room. Something inside her chest pushed her forward, something protective and human before anything else. She raised her hand and knocked softly. No answer. She waited. Still nothing. The sound came again. Closer, rawer, like someone trying not to break apart but losing the fight. She pushed the door gently. It opened without resistance. And then she stopped breathing for a moment. Michael sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. His shoulders were shaking, not violently, but enough to show how hard he was struggling. His hair fell forward, hiding most of his face, and the lamp beside him cast a soft glow over the room, turning everything warmer except him. He looked like a shadow in a quiet storm. Emma had never seen him like that. Not even close. She always assumed he was strong, maybe too strong, the kind of young man who handled everything on his own because he didn't trust others to handle even a piece of his heart. But this was something else. This was the version of him he kept hidden from the world. "Michael," she said softly, barely above a whisper. He lifted his head, startled. His eyes were red, not just tired red but broken red, the kind that came from hours of trying to stay composed. He wiped his face quickly with the back of his hand and turned slightly away, as if the angle could hide what she had already seen. "Emma," he said, his voice rough like he had swallowed too many words before letting any out. "I'm fine. Just go." But she could hear the lie. It cracked at the edges of his sentence. She stepped inside anyway, though slow, giving him space. "You're not fine. You don't have to explain anything, but something's wrong." He shook his head immediately. "I don't want to talk. I'm not here to force you," she said, her voice gentle. "I just want to know if you're okay." He let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than irritation. "I said I'm fine." But he wasn't. Anyone could see that. His hands trembled. His breathing was uneven. His whole body looked exhausted, like he had held himself up for too long and finally ran out of strength. Emma glanced around the room. Textbooks on the desk. Clothes on the floor. A half-finished assignment glowing on his laptop screen. Nothing unusual. Yet everything felt heavy. She took a careful step closer, ready to step back if he needed it. "Michael, you don't have to hide from me. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling." That sentence landed somewhere inside him. She saw it. His shoulders lifted and dropped slowly, as if a tiny weight shifted, but he still didn't look at her. "I don't want you to see me like this," he murmured. The honesty in that sentence made the room feel smaller, warmer, sadder. Emma hadn't expected to feel it so deeply. She wasn't his mother. She wasn't the person he trusted most. But hearing him say that, hearing the quiet shame in his voice, made something inside her ache. "You don't have to be ashamed of hurting," she whispered. "Everyone hurts." He wiped his face again, this time slower, and let out a shaky breath. For a moment she thought he might open up, but instead he stood quickly, turned away, and moved toward the window. The movement wasn't aggressive, just desperate, like he needed space from his own emotions. "The last thing I need," he muttered, "is someone feeling sorry for me." "I don't feel sorry for you," she said. "I care about you." Those words froze him for a second. He didn't turn back, but his hands curled slightly at his sides. "I don't need that either," he said, but the crack in his voice betrayed him again. Emma didn't move closer. She stayed where she was, giving him control of the moment. "Then tell me what you do need." Another long, hollow silence filled the room. Michael didn't answer. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't have the words for the storm he was fighting. Finally he spoke, voice softer than before, almost small. "I just need to be alone right now." Emma nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Okay, I respect that. But I'm here. If you need anything. If you change your mind. If you just want someone to sit quietly near you. I'm here." He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sentence wash over him. Not accepting it fully, not rejecting it either. Just letting it exist. Emma stepped toward the door, ready to give him the space he asked for. But before she left, she looked at him one more time. Not with pity, but with a strange mix of worry and empathy that surprised her. She had never realized how much she wanted him to trust her until now. "Michael," she said gently, "you're not alone. I just want you to remember that." And then she walked out, closing the door softly behind her. But the moment she reached the hallway, she stopped, hand still on the doorknob, heart still beating too fast. She knew something bigger was happening. Something fragile and important. She didn't know what he was dealing with, but she knew this wasn't just a bad night. There was more. A story behind his tears. A weight he was carrying alone. And she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this single night, was about to change something in their home. Something that would reshape the distance between them. Something that had been building for a long time without either of them noticing. She walked downstairs slowly, her mind full, her chest tight, knowing this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The next morning felt heavier than the night before, as if the entire house had absorbed Michael's pain and now held it in the walls. Emma woke early, not because she planned to, but because her mind refused to let her rest. She replayed the scene from his room again and again, questioning if she had handled it right or if she should have stayed longer, pushed harder, or simply walked away sooner. Nothing about it had a clear answer. That was the hardest part. She wanted to help him, but helping someone who didn't want to be seen was like trying to carry water in her hands. Impossible without losing some along the way. She walked downstairs and made coffee, hoping the warm smell would calm her racing thoughts. But it only reminded her of the quiet tension hanging in the house. She could almost feel his sadness drifting through the halls, like something fragile lying just out of sight. She kept glancing toward the staircase, waiting for him, wondering if he would even come down. She didn't want to push him, yet the silence made her restless. Finally she heard slow footsteps. Not heavy, not angry, just tired. Michael appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, his eyes dull, his hair messy in a way that showed he hadn't slept much. He looked older than he had the night before, as if one bad evening had aged him by years. His shoulders slumped slightly, and he seemed unsure whether to walk all the way into the room or turn around and hide again. "Morning," Emma said gently, trying to keep her voice light. She didn't want him to feel cornered. "Morning," he answered, barely audible. He sat at the table with a quiet sigh, his gaze fixed on the mug in front of him. He wasn't drinking it. He wasn't doing anything really. Just sitting, staring, breathing slowly like every inhale took effort. She studied him quietly. He wasn't someone who cried easily. He wasn't weak. If anything, he carried too much strength, the kind that cracked people from the inside when nobody noticed. And now she could see it, the cracks, thin but deep, weaving through every breath he took. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Fine." The lie landed in the air like a stone. She didn't challenge it, didn't call him out. She simply waited, letting the silence stretch just enough for honesty to find room. After a long pause, he exhaled. "I didn't want you to see me like that last night." "I know," she said. "But I'm glad I did." He lifted his eyes for the first time that morning, confusion flickering across them. "Why?" "It was embarrassing." "No," she replied. "It was human." He didn't seem convinced. He looked away again, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the mug. His breaths were shallow, almost shaky. Something inside him was fighting. She could see it. She waited a moment before speaking again. "Michael, you don't have to tell me anything. But if you want to talk, I'm here." Her voice wasn't pushing. It was offering. A bridge he could cross only if he chose. He swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked between the table and her face, as if debating whether to hide again or finally let something out. Then he spoke, voice cracking at the edges. "I messed up." Emma felt a small jolt in her chest. Not fear, but a deep shift, like the air around them had suddenly changed. He leaned back in the chair, his hands trembling a little as he ran his fingers through his hair. "Everything's falling apart," he whispered. "School, my job, my—" He stopped, closing his eyes briefly as if searching for the courage to finish. "My relationship." Emma's concern sharpened. Not the intrusive kind, the caring kind. "What happened?" He shook his head. "I don't even know where to start." "Start anywhere," she said softly. For a moment he hesitated. But then the words began to spill, like a dam finally giving way. He told her about his classes, how he had fallen behind, how his grades had slipped, how stress kept piling on until he didn't even recognize the person staring back at him in the mirror. Then he told her about work, how the hours drained him and how he struggled to balance everything. But the worst part was the breakup. "She said I wasn't enough," he said, voice trembling. "Said I didn't try, didn't communicate, didn't show her anything real." Emma felt his pain like a weight in her own chest. Breakups were hard at any age, but at 20, when emotions ran deep and expectations ran high, they hit harder than most people admitted. "I tried," he murmured. "I really did. But I guess trying wasn't enough." His eyes began to fill again, and he quickly looked away, ashamed. Emma leaned forward slightly but not too close. Enough to show presence, not pressure. "Michael, someone saying those words doesn't make them true." He shook his head again, his voice barely holding together. "It feels true." "It's not," she said firmly, though her tone stayed gentle. "You're going through a lot. Anyone would struggle." He pressed his lips together. His shoulders rose and fell in an unsteady breath. "I feel like I'm letting everyone down." "You're not," she said. He didn't reply. His silence spoke louder than any words he could have used. He didn't believe her. Not because he didn't trust her, but because the weight of his own disappointment in himself was louder than reason. "You didn't let me down," she added quietly. That sentence hit him differently. His eyes flicked up again, surprise and confusion mixing with something else. Something softer, almost vulnerable. Emma continued. "I know you probably think I don't notice much or that I don't understand you. But I see you trying. I see how hard you push yourself. I see how much you hold in. And I want you to know it matters." He swallowed hard again, and this time a tear slipped down his cheek before he could wipe it away. "I don't want to be a burden," he said, voice trembling. "You aren't," she replied immediately. "You never have been." He wiped his cheek with the sleeve of his hoodie, embarrassed by the tears he couldn't control. "I hate feeling like this." "I know," she whispered. "But feeling doesn't make you weak. It makes you real." He didn't answer, but something shifted in his expression. A tiny release. A tiny opening. Not a miracle. Not a complete fix. But a crack in the emotional armor he had worn for too long. They sat in silence for a moment. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that holds space for healing. Then Michael spoke again, voice low. "Last night, I just couldn't hold it together. You don't have to, she said. Not all the time. He stared into his coffee again, the liquid still untouched. I kept thinking, if Dad were here, I wouldn't want him to see me like that. Emma understood. David loved his son deeply, but he wasn't always the easiest man to open up to. He had high expectations, and even if he meant well, he didn't always realize how his pressure affected Michael. You don't have to be strong every second, she whispered. Not for him, not for me, not for anyone. He looked up slowly, the tension in his eyes fading just a little. You say it like it's easy. It's not, she said. It's one of the hardest things in the world. He let out a breath. An exhausted, broken sound, but it wasn't frustration this time. It was relief. The beginning of release. Emma felt something warm bloom inside her. Not in a romantic way. Not even in a maternal way. Just human. Compassionate. She felt the responsibility of someone being trusted by another person who rarely trusted anyone. Thank you, he whispered. You don't have to thank me, she replied. I'm here because I care. He nodded slowly, eyes lowering again, but the lines of pain on his face softened. He wasn't healed. He wasn't okay. But he wasn't alone anymore, and that made a difference. For a long moment they stayed like that. Quiet, breathing the same air, sharing the same heavy truth. And then he stood slowly. I think I'm gonna go try to study, he said. Okay, she replied. If you need a break or company or just quiet, you know where I am. He hesitated at the doorway. Emma. Yes. Last night. And this morning you helped more than you think. Then he turned and walked upstairs, leaving her standing in the kitchen with a full heart and a deep sense that something had changed forever. Not in a dramatic, impossible way, but in a way that felt healing, honest, and real. A new kind of connection had formed, delicate but strong, born from pain but shaped by trust. And Emma knew the story wasn't done. Not even close. The house felt different that evening, not louder, not brighter, just changed in a subtle way Emma couldn't name. Something quiet had shifted between her and Michael, something delicate but important. It wasn't closeness in the traditional sense, not the kind built from years of bonding, but something closer to understanding, like a curtain had finally lifted and allowed them to see each other without the usual barriers. She didn't expect it, and she didn't know what to do with it yet, but the shift sat with her all day, settling deeply into her thoughts. She spent the afternoon cleaning up the living room just to keep busy. She wasn't cleaning because it was messy, but because her mind needed movement. Every quiet moment made her think about his cracked voice, his shaking hands, the broken version of him he tried so hard to hide. She kept wiping the same shelf over and over until she finally told herself to stop. When she walked into the kitchen for a glass of water, she saw Michael standing near the sink, sorting through old notebooks. Papers were spread across the counter. One notebook had torn edges, another had a worn cover, like it had been carried through countless emotional storms. He didn't notice her at first. He was too focused, too deep in concentration, flipping pages quickly, ripping some out, stacking others neatly. Something about the scene struck her. It looked like he was trying to rebuild himself piece by piece. She stepped closer, careful not to startle him. You're working pretty hard, she said. He lifted his head, eyes tired but not defeated. Trying to get everything together, he replied. His voice was steadier than that morning, though still quiet. I just needed to sort things out. That's a good start, she said. He nodded, closing a notebook with a soft thud. I didn't realize how much I let pile up. I think that's why everything hit me so hard yesterday. Emma didn't need to respond right away. She could feel what he meant. Sometimes problems didn't break people all at once. Sometimes they stacked slowly until one small thing made the whole pile collapse. Michael continued sorting, tossing a few more pages into a trash pile. I thought if I ignored things long enough they'd fix themselves, he admitted. Turns out that doesn't work. It rarely does, she replied softly. He gave a faint smile. Yeah, I figured that out. They worked side by side for a moment, him sorting papers, her standing quietly near him, giving silent support. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was peaceful, like a gentle pause in a long, exhausting day. After a few minutes he spoke again, voice lower this time. You really meant what you said this morning? She tilted her head slightly. Which part? That I'm not a burden. She didn't hesitate. I meant every word. He exhaled a shaky breath, not sad but relieved. I've felt like one for a long time, he said. Not because of anything you or Dad did. Just everything. School. Work. Expectations. Trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be. It's a lot. It is a lot, she agreed. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms loosely. I didn't expect you to care so much, he said. Not because you're cold or anything. I just didn't think I mattered that much. You matter, she said firmly. More than you think. He looked down, blinking quickly, and she knew. The emotions were rising again, but he didn't crumble this time. He stood steady, breathing through it, letting the truth sink into his bones. I'm not used to talking like this, he said honestly. Most of the time I keep everything inside because I don't want to disappoint anyone. You're not disappointing anyone, she told him. You're just human, Michael. There's nothing wrong with needing help. He nodded slowly. I'm starting to get that. He paused, then added, last night, I thought everything was falling apart. Now it feels like maybe things can get better. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. Not excitement. Not pride. Something deeper, calmer, like relief that he finally let someone in. They will get better, she said. One step at a time. Michael glanced at the papers again, taking a slow breath. I want to fix things with school. I want to get back on track. I'm tired of feeling like I'm drowning. You're capable, she said. And you don't have to do it alone. He looked at her again, eyes steady. Thank you. He didn't say it like a polite phrase. He said it like someone who finally understood what gratitude felt like. Someone who finally saw the hand reaching out to him. You don't have to thank me, she said. This is what family is. He tensed slightly, not out of discomfort, but because the word family hit him somewhere deep. He didn't reject it. He didn't stiffen. He just absorbed it quietly, like it meant more than either of them expected. They kept talking, slowly opening pieces of the past he had kept locked away. He admitted how college pressure had built up, how he didn't want to disappoint his father, how losing his relationship made him feel like a failure. Emma listened without interruption, letting him unload every tightly held emotion. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was honest. After a while, he sank onto a stool and sighed. It feels weird, he said, saying everything out loud. Weird good or weird bad? She asked. Weird freeing, he answered. Like maybe I don't have to carry all of it myself. You don't, she said. He nodded, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. I always thought showing emotions meant I wasn't strong enough. But last night, I didn't have a choice. Everything just broke. And now you're rebuilding, she said. He gave a small laugh. Yeah. Slowly. Emma smiled. Slow is fine. For a moment, silence filled the kitchen again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was gentle, peaceful. Like the air was giving them a chance to breathe after a long day of holding pain. Then he looked up and she could see something new in his eyes. Not just trust but comfort. Like he finally felt safe. Emma, he said quietly. I'm really glad you checked on me last night. Even though I told you to leave. I'm glad I didn't listen, she said warmly. He nodded. Me too. He stood up, stretching his shoulders, moving with more strength than he had earlier. I think I'm going to go through the rest of my old stuff and try to organize everything. Maybe if I get my space together, my mind will feel better too. That's a good idea, she said. He hesitated before leaving the kitchen. Can I talk to you again later? If things get overwhelming. Her answer came without thought. Anytime. He smiled, small but real. Okay. He walked upstairs and Emma watched him go, feeling an unexpected sense of hope. Not just hope for him but hope for their relationship. For the first time since she joined the family, she felt like she wasn't standing outside the doorway of his life. She wasn't forcing her way in. She wasn't pretending. She was being trusted. Later that night, the house grew quiet again. Not heavy quiet. Peaceful quiet. Emma sat on the couch with a blanket, watching the soft glow of a lamp fill the room. She thought about how close she came to walking past his door the night before, how easy it would have been to ignore the sound, to assume he needed space, to tell herself it wasn't her place. But she didn't walk past the door. She stepped through it. And everything changed. She didn't know what the future would look like. Whether Michael would stay open or close up again. Whether his stress would settle or return. Whether their connection would grow or fade. But she knew one thing clearly. He wouldn't have to go through anything alone again. Not as long as she was here. And that promise, unspoken but strong, settled into the quiet house like a new foundation. Something steady, something healing, something that finally made their home feel whole.